Welcome into the shop, friends. So I do need to apologize up front. I had a lot of footage for this video and I ended up losing a lot of it. It somehow got deleted. But anyhow, we are starting on a Nakashima table and I'm going to take you through in the beginning and try to fill you in and catch you up on where we left off. So down here, we got the base. We're working on the base. These are double mortise and tenons down in here. And then got these big dados right here, which kind of function as a mortise and tenon. We got those cut. So we need to get these parts cleaned up. Got a little bit of epoxy to fill some of the defects in the wood. This is for a bridle joint. So we come over here. It's like a bridle joint going into a castle joint. Got these parts, which have a sliding dovetail. You can't see right now because they're taped, but basically this is where we're at. Oh, and then right here, these are going to be the leaves. So these are 2 layers of 3/4 inch Baltic birch, laminated those together in the veneer bag. And then those are going to be veneered, and those will be the leaves. And then over here, these are the other part of what I guess you would call the aprons. And those are also double mortise and tenon that will fit into this other side right here. So anyway, where we're at right now, I pre-finished all my parts. So you can see these have a layer of oil on them right now. I've got 2 coats of shellac. We're getting ready to spray the third. So we'll get a 3rd layer of shellac on all these, which is a sanding sealer. Use that to seal the wood, and then we'll come back, and after the table is completed, we'll shoot 3 to 4 coats of conversion varnish, and that will be our actual top coat. Alright, so what you see I'm doing here is I'm just going through and just lightly scuffing these with a 320 pad, getting them ready for the shellac. This does is it just kind of helps to finish it here a little better, and it knocks off any of like the roughness or what's called napping from applying a wet finish. Alright, so now I'm using my Fuji spray with a 1.5mm tip, and I'm just spraying a couple coats of de-waxed shellac. I use this as a sanding sealer, it just seals the wood and gets it ready for your top coat. I like to do this before I assemble because glue cannot stick to it, so you see I tape everything off. And then by pre-finishing these parts, it just makes it a whole lot easier when it comes to cleaning up glue after you're glue up. So this video is going to seem like we're kind of jumping around a little bit, and in some ways we are because I lost a lot of my video footage. But what you've seen in the beginning, we were building the top section. Now I'm starting on the bottom section. So I'm going to take you through and you can kind of see some of the processes I made to making a lot of these parts. You see that I keep going back to my clipboard, my plans. I actually made all these plans in Fusion 360, drew them up in AutoCAD. And I just really like that, having a set of blueprints to follow. I design all my furniture before I actually start building it, and it's just good to have that reference. It makes the flow of building furniture a lot easier, especially on more commission work and production work. So I traced all these parts out. Now I'm just going over my bandsaw, and I'm just rough cutting them out on the bandsaw, just following that line and cutting them out. These big parts can be a little bit awkward on this little 14-inch saw, but after spending 2 years of restoring this saw and doing a full nut and bolt restoration, I'm a little bit partial to old gal. She has kind of a soft spot in my heart, and I just like using it. Alright, so we just left the bandsaw. Now you're going to see I'm just coming over and I'm reaching for my number 5, and we're just going to take off any of those bandsaw marks, and we're going to smooth them up using a hand plane. You could, I guess, do this. You could build a template and do this on a shaper or a router table, but I just really enjoy doing it with hand planes, and I like the handcrafted feel that you get using hand tools. After the hand plane, I just come back with a card scraper. Now I'm just coming back with a little piece of 220 and just taking out any of those tooling marks and smoothing them up. And now I'll just go through and I'll do that on the rest of the parts, and we'll get them all cleaned up. And so now the final step is I'm coming in with my number 3, and I'm just slightly chamfering these edges. Careful to put the same amount of chamfer on every edge. I know a lot of people prefer to do this with a block plane, but I just really don't like block planes that much. And this little number 3, I pretty well just set it up to where I just do chamfers with it, and it works out really well. You can also chamfer the end grain using your hand plane, but here lately I've gotten to where I actually just really prefer doing it with a file. It makes for a really nice clean look. So I wanted to show you this. To be quite honest with you, in the past I've struggled a little bit with spraying finishes, but I don't know how well you can pick that up on the camera. But this has 3 coats sprayed on it, and I mean, it's just turned out so nice. And it feels so nice. And the only thing I really did different is I've been doing a lot better about keeping my shop climate controlled, like the humidity and keeping it around, room temperature like it should be. But the other thing is I pre-finished all these with oil before I sprayed them. And that's really the biggest thing I could think that made the biggest difference. But anyhow, I just wanted to come and just show that, which these still have to be top coated. But even like the shellac sanding sealer, like I've never had it actually come out that nice before. And so anyhow, all right, we're going to get together and we're going to start putting this together. So as you can see, there's double mortise and tenons on these aprons here that go into right here. And then, like I said, these are sliding dovetails. So let me talk a little bit about this joinery. Oh, before I get in there, I wanted to show you a little bit of a mistake I did. I actually showed this in my lost footage, but like I said, it ended up lost. I'm not ashamed to talk about my mistakes. We all make them. As you can see here, as you can imagine, when I was cutting these dovetails, I actually cut them out with the dado stack, and then I go with the router bit and actually cut the actual dovetail part of that. And what had happened is I cut those dados on the wrong side. So I had to make a block and fill that in and redo it. I had to recut these mortises. The good thing is where it is on the table, like these are never going to be seen. I try to grain match them as best I can. It's a little bit of overspray on the shellac. Once this goes, once I get all this glued up, I'm actually going to run it through my sander to flatten it. So once that does, you probably won't even never see it at all. And then where it's at, it's not going to be seen anyway. And it's going to be just as strong, just as effective, because I mean, it's long grain to long grain glue, and the glue rebinds to the fibers of the wood. And so structurally is exactly the same. Didn't make any difference. But anyway, if you ever have that happen, if it's on a spot where it's not really seen, that's a good way to fix that without having to completely remake the part. So, yeah, here are those sliding dovetails on here. Let me talk a little bit about this joinery in here. So we got the double mortise and tenons. As you can see, these tenons are going this way horizontally, not vertical. So let me talk a little bit about why we do this. If we grab this part here, let me grab these other ones. All right, so if we look right here and you look inside of here, when you cut these mortises, you're cutting the fibers right here. So you can see the end grain. But if you look inside right here on this way, if I get my camera to zoom, you have the long grain. Okay. So if the mortise was a big mortise going up and down this way, you're basically gluing into end grain. It would be no different than just trying to glue the piece on like this. You have the end grain going on the long grain, and as you can imagine, that's not a very strong connection. That's just gonna break because the way wood glue works is it's got to be able to bind to the wood fibers. So all this, you can see the wood grain here, and you see the long grain there, and those are the wood fibers. And essentially what you're doing is there is a essentially like an atom, like a molecule inside of trees when they're living, and it stays there when it dies, and it bonds all of the wood fibers together. You can think of the wood grain as like a bunch of straws, and there's like a molecule inside of there that binds all those straws together. So essentially what wood glue does is it replaces that binder and binds the two wood together. So whenever you use proper wood glue with a proper joint, you're quite literally taking two boards and making them one. They become one at that point. If you try to break them, they're going to break somewhere else besides at that joint because they can't break there anymore because that bond is stronger than the actual bond that was in the tree itself, if that makes sense. So going back to right here, essentially, if we had let me get my camera to focus again. All right, so if we had a big vertical mortise, essentially you're doing that same thing of just creating, an end grain wood connection. Is basically like a butt joint, and the glue is not going to hold. So by doing the double mortise and tenons, like you see right here, we have this long grain in here, and then we have the long grain on the tenons coming out here, which allow these fibers to glue and bond to these fibers right here. And by having the double mortise and tenons, you have double that gluing surface. You have all of this right here and all of this right here. That makes a really strong, secure connection. So I wanted to just come in here and talk about that and why we do that and why we have the double mortise and tenons and why they orientate the way they do. That is very important. Some of the other joinery we have going on here, we have this half bridle joint, half castle joint. To be honest with you, I would have preferred to make this a whole bridle joint, but with the dado stack, I could only go about 2¼ inches. So that's what this is. This is 2 inches, and then it's a 2-inch castle joint, which will go into right here, which is fine because we have all this gluing surface right here, which is plenty of gluing surface. And then having that castle joint coming down here will help prevent it from racking. And the same thing is why we made these shoulders. So there's 2 reasons why we did these shoulders here. A, it makes for a cleaner look. And then secondly, those shoulders kind of help, again, with the racking to keep it from racking. Now, if we move in here and we talk about these sliding dovetails that you see right here, and I went back and forth on how to do this or how I wanted to do it, I guess I should say. I thought about doing, again, double mortise and tenons going in this way, but the problem is they're not very deep. Like these right here are only 3/4 of an inch deep, which would meant that these are only 3/4 of an inch deep. On these inner rails right here, they're going to be sandwiched in between, so there's no way for them to pull apart. So on those, I wasn't worried about them having to pull apart because there's no way they could. So on here, there's plenty. These are going to be freestanding outside on their own. And so I wanted to have some mechanical structure along with the glue, just in case, if over time the glue ever fails, there's still that mechanical function on there, if it makes sense. So we still have all this gluing surface. We have all this gluing surface in here, which is still a lot of glue. but it still has that mechanical function to it if the glue ever fails. So that's kind of my reasoning behind some of that. Alrighty, so now we're moving on to actually gluing these together. And you can see one of the problems with sliding dovetails and why I really just don't like using them unless I have to, is they're just so dang hard to get together. You know, to get a proper joint, I mean, you're just trying to force a lot of wood into another piece of wood, and they just never really go together that well. But they are a good strong joint, and they work really well in certain applications. Now that we have the two end sections glued up, now we're going to get together to glue in these side aprons in. And as you're going to see, I have a little bit of difficulty doing this. Mainly because I didn't have long enough clamps. I thought I did before I did it, and in my head I thought it was going to go way better than it actually did. But you have that sometimes, and you just push through and you make it work. Alright, that was a little bit harder than I anticipated to get glued up. I couldn't get even. I don't have clamps long enough. Ideally, I would have put it all together at once and glued these on. I didn't have clamps long enough other than just pipe clamps, and they don't apply even pressure all the way across like parallel clamps do. So I wasn't fond of that idea. Plus, that's a lot to try to glue up all at once in one glue up. So I glued these wings on, these little dovetail wings on first, and then went back and glued in the middle stretchers with the mortise and tenons. And in my mind, I thought it was going to go a lot better than it did. It didn't go bad. We got it glued up, and there we go. It's in clamps, everything seated properly and closed up good. But yeah, could have went better, could have went worse, but there we go. It's in clamps. We'll wait for that to dry and get the rest of it together. All right. Good morning, guys. It's the next day, and we just got in the shop, getting working. So, show you over here. We have this top apron, if you will. It's all glued up. So now the next step, you can see the sliding dovetails in there, and these are mortise and tenon. And so yeah, everything's shouldered up good. It looks good. Anyway, the next step on this is we're actually going to run it through my 38-inch wide Woodmaster sander. We're going to run the top through and the bottom and get those flat so they're perfectly flat. That is why I did not finish the tops of them, because it's going to go through the sander. So we're gonna do that, but before we do that, we need to finish these parts. So these parts you saw that I got all these cleaned up yesterday. So these parts, I'm gonna blow them off with compressed air and get a coat of oil on them and let those dry, and then we're gonna spray them with shellac. One thing I wanted to talk about was these posts that you see here, because the footage was lost. You didn't get to see how I made those. So these are actually 2 pieces of 8/4 cherry that are book matched and then laminated together. So if you look, if you can see the grain, how it's going this way, it's going this way. Because the way I made these is I actually came out of the same board and I book matched them and glued them together. And so that way you get a nice, clean, uniform grain, and it just makes it look, unless you really look, you can't tell that it's 2 boards. It makes it look like it's one, especially like on the side. You see the cathedrals, and you look here. We'll flip it over. Well, that one's not, but anyway, you get the point. Like, it makes for a better look, and it's, so that's how I did those. And the way I laminated these was I actually glued them and I veneered them in my veneer bag. For veneering, I've actually got the 6 CFM vacuum press down here. So that's what I use for veneering. and I got a 4-foot by 8-foot bag that I use. So I just put these in there and laminated them. That is a really, really good way to do that. It make sure that you have even clamping pressure through the entire lamination, and you get a lot better product than you would just using clamps. I mean, you can obviously use a lot of clamps if that's all you got, but if you have a veneering system, it's easier. We're bouncing back and forth a little bit because we've had a lot of parts that we pre-finished and waiting on finish to dry, and then other parts and clamps waiting for those to dry. So what you were previously seeing, we were working on the top section. We're going back to the bottom section now, and so I'm just cleaning these off, a little bit of mineral spirits, and then we're going to go and finish them with oil. So I'm just using boiled linseed oil from the big box store on here for a few reasons. One is because it dries really quick, and so we want something that's going to dry really quick so we can get on to spraying sealer in our top coat. Like something like a tung oil, it just takes way too long to dry. And the only reason why we're using this, we're not using it as a protective finish, we're just using it to kind of bring out some of the color and enhance the appearance. So this stuff is perfect for this application. So now we're back over to the top section while we're waiting for the bottom section to dry, and we're just running this through the 38-inch sander to get everything nice and flat. You see, and I'm kind of watching and being real careful because my sander is 38 inches, like I said, and if I remember correctly, this is somewhere around like 36, so that would be a little cautious that I didn't look through center. Alright, so now that it came out of the sander, we ran it through both sides, and you can see that it's perfectly flat all the way across, and that is one of the really nice things. You see the sliding dovetail there, and that is one of the really nice things about having that sander is I can run, I was able to run this apron through fully glued up, and now it's completely perfectly flat. There's no twist in it, and so it's going to be a good level surface to put a tabletop on. And it saved me a ton of work from having to clean up glue or flatten it by hand with a hand plane, and it's just a really nice piece of machinery to have. So now that everything is glued up and out of the sander and flattened, I'm coming through with a spoke shave, and I'm just slightly chamfering these edges. It just makes it to where you don't have any sharp edges that you're feeling, and then also you want to break your edges just slightly, so that way when you spray a film finish, if you don't do that, the film finish can crack on any sharp edges. So we're just kind of cleaning those up a little bit. Alright, so now we got everything finished. Everything is, the bottom section and the top section is glued up. I ran the bottom section through the sander just like I did the top and got everything flattened. And now we're just kind of doing a dry assembly, making sure everything goes together like it is. And we're going to start gluing this thing together. Like I said, just checking and making sure that everything's going to seat properly, which it should because we did it before we pre-finished everything, but just double checking. And kind of the same story as on the top section. This glue up was a little bit of a pain in the butt. So I had trouble right here. The other side seated up fine. This side did not want to seat up very good, and kind of fought and struggled with this. And also when you're gluing, you only got about 15 minutes of open time, so you got to work pretty quickly, and panic starts setting in pretty quickly when you start having glue set up and everything's wet. So like I said, I had a little bit of trouble getting that one side seated up, so put some blankets down and I'm flipping it over on its side and kind of got to tap on the bottom here and a little bit of brute force and ignorance to get this together. Then I ended up having to grab a board and put across this top apron so I have a place to put a clamp, and trying to seat that together with clamps. And for some reason, that one side there was just really fighting me to put it together. But we got it together, and now we're coming in with a hand plane, and we're just cleaning up the bottoms. So I left everything a little bit proud so I could come in with a plane and get everything nice and flat. Now the base is done and it's assembled, we're switching gears and we're coming over to the top. So a little story on this top. The client's grandfather was a map maker, and so this top was served as a drafting table. And she's held on to it for all these years, and she really wanted to include it into a table. We went back and forth on several designs. So one thing was she wanted to use this top, and it had to have leaves that stored inside the table. So we ended up deciding on a Nakashima table, which was we had to kind of modify it and make it to where it would work. So I had to spread the top aprons out and a little bit of head scratching, but we got it to work. And so I sanded it down with the orbital sander, and what you're seeing now is I'm just going in with a little bit of epoxy and filling all the old like knots and holes and stuff that were in it from over the years. We want to keep some of the character in there, but we also, this is an expensive table, so we want it to be flat and for it to feel nice, while still holding on to some of that nostalgic. So now what you're seeing is we're doing some resawing. We're resawing for the veneers, for the leaves. We're going to book match those and try to make them look nice. These are out of cherry. They're going to match the base. The tabletop was actually pine, but it had a lot of patina and color over the years, and so the cherry really matched well and blended quite well. So that's what we decided on. This is something I learned from another woodworker. In between each pass on the bandsaw, I just set my joiner really shallow, and I just come over and take a quick pass and kind of clean it up, so that way you actually lose less material in between each resaw on the bandsaw. And then now I just built a platen, and I'm running these veneers through on the sander to get them flattened. And these veneers are 3/16 of an inch thick. That's what I finish all my veneers at. That is the thickness you can go without worrying about them cracking, and also leave the maximum amount of thickness. So now we're going back over to the substrate, and I overcut my substrates, and so now I'm just going in and cleaning up those edges on the joiner. A little bit awkward because these are pretty tall, but getting those nice and flat. Could have also done this with a track saw, but yeah, I decided to do it with the joiner. And now we're just ripping the opposite edge on the table saw at the finish width -3/4. And then we will go through and we'll edge band all of this with 3/8 inch cherry. And here I am just ripping all that cherry down to 3/8 that we will use for the substrates. Ooh, got a splinter in my hand or something there. I don't know what I did. But you'll see I actually got all these out of the exact same board. And again, try to grain match as much as you can with the veneers, because the end goal is you want it to not look like they're separate pieces. You want it to all blend and look like they're all one big piece. Then finally I mitered the corners and glued it all up. These are always kind of a pain in the butt to glue up, because you got to get all those miters absolutely perfect on all four corners. And I don't know why. For me, miters are just always such a pain in the butt. And now what you see I'm doing is I'm laying out all those book matched veneers that we just cut. And I'm just trying to figure out which sides I want to use and which orientation I want to go with. This is always really important because you want to figure out which sides look the best and, make it look nice. Now that I got them all laid out, I'm just going through and I'm marking the dead center on that fifth piece there in the middle, because that will actually be the end of two leaves and they'll meet up together in the middle, because these are actually book matched between both leaves. And now what you're seeing I'm doing is I'm lining these up, and I'm going to mark them so that way I know which way they go together, which orientation they go. And then I'm flipping them end for end, and then we're going to take these over onto a jig that I made, and we're going to join these together using my number 7 lead nose and hand plane. You can also do this with a router. That method never works very well for me. Plus, hand planes are just so enjoyable, and for me, I just think that hand planes make the absolute best joint whenever trying to join two boards together, especially on veneers. Then after we get them all joined, we come over and we check and make sure that there's no gaps and everything's lined up absolutely perfect. Once they are, we tape them all together using blue masking tape. I know they make veneer tape, and some people prefer to use that. For me, again, that stuff's a pain in the butt. If you use commercial veneers, you can't use masking tape because it will actually stick and it'll peel up the veneer. Good thing with shop-made veneers, and why I cut all my own veneers in the shop, is because they're so much thicker. These are, again, are the maximum thickness you can get away with without running into problems. So you can actually sand and refinish these if you need to, because they have that thickness. And because of that, I can just use blue masking tape, and I've never had an issue. It comes off just fine. We are actually going to flatten these substrates with the edge banding and the sander, but before I do that, I need to get a flat reference edge to that. So I'm just coming in with number 4 hand plane and just kind of knocking down. So I left that edge banding a little proud, and so we just need to get one side fairly flat so we have that reference edge to run through the sander. And then finally, we ran these through the sander to get them perfectly flat, so we have a nice, perfect flat substrate for our veneers. I had to include this clip in here because this is just, every time I have to do anything with veneer, I dread it, even though I love doing veneer work, because I have a tiny shop. It's about a 30 by 30 2-car garage that I use for my shop. And so this veneer bag, the only way I can use it is I have to put the blade all the way inside the arbor of the table saw, and then I lay it across the table saw on the outfeed table. And there's not very much room to even get it there, and with all the dust collection pipes, plus all the radio arm saw back behind me, and if you can imagine, I've ripped this bag so many times and it's had so many patches on it. But, you know, small shop problems. So maybe one day we'll be in a bigger shop and I won't have to deal with this anymore. But for right now, enjoy watching me struggle with this stupid bag. Alright, so we got the veneers in the bag, got them glued up. Now they came out, and I left the veneers slightly proud. I put them upside down in the bag. I ran into a little bit of a problem on that because the substrates are so flat that it's never really the best way to do it, but whenever doing table leaves and they have to be exact dimensions, it's really the only way that you can do that. So then came back with a trim router and flush trimmed them. Now I'm just coming back with a block and some 220 and just kind of cleaning them up. And now that the leaves are done, now I got a route out for the mechanism for the leaves. I actually made this with some tabletop T-track, and so we're going to flush mount it. So I'm just coming in with a router and an edge guide and doing this, and again, this was not easy. Right after I got this table done, I actually had a CNC sent to me. Huge thank you to XCar for sending that to me. I am so thankful and grateful to have that. I wish I would have had it on this build because I could have popped this in the CNC and do it, but I didn't. But moving forward, if I ever do this again, I am so thankful to have that. But for now, we just did it with the router, and it worked. Used track saw track, and spent about a day and a half doing this, but we got her done. Now what you're seeing I'm doing is I actually made like little side bumper pads so that way if the leaves run into the side, they won't get scratched. I actually leather wrapped all these. I cross stitched and leather wrapped them all. It's going in with this book shape and cleaning those up. I actually had all the footage of me doing all that, and again it got lost. So I'm really bummed. It was the first time I ever did any leather work, and I was actually really quite pleased how it turned out. Now I'm just putting in all these parts that you just watched me cut out on the bandsaw, and I'm screwing them in using some brass screws. And these little rails around the bottom, again, those were also leather wrapped, and I'm just screwing those in, and those will be what the leaves actually sit inside of. Switching gears yet again, so now you can see we got the T-track in there with the miter guides that are run on ball bearings. I oiled them real well, and then these are actually 3/4 inch Baltic birch that the actual tabletop will screw to. This is going to get recessed into the tabletop. What I'm doing now is I'm coming in with a router, routing out the grooves. They're slotted on the sides, and then it's a center hole, positive hole in the center, so that way the tabletop can't move, but then it's allowed to expand and contract on both against the width, so that way you don't have to worry about any moisture or movement. And then, so this tabletop, what you're seeing here, I'm doing here, is I actually have to, like I said, route that out for that Baltic birch that's going to sit down inside of there. And part of this too is if you look on the sides, it's actually, the top is only 3/4 of an inch thick, and then it's got like an edge banding across it on both sides to make it look like it's 1.5 inches. So with the Baltic birch, what I did is it actually only sits in there about 1/2 inch, and it gave it some of that height, and it's kind of hard to explain. When you see it in real life, it makes sense, but maybe when you see it when it's all together in the video, it makes sense to you as well. But I'm just going in and I'm routing for that substrate to actually go down and sit inside of there. That the table will actually slide against, so it's sliding against that and not the actual table. You also see that I'm just freehanding this. I just freehanded it pretty close to the line, and then you will see that I actually come in with a chisel and I clean it up. Again, I got a CNC like a week after I finished this table. Boy, would it have been handy to have when I had actually done this at the time. But, you know, new technology is cool, but you can still get it done with, you know, the old school way as well. Now finally, we're just gluing in and brad nailing in those little plywood pieces that will actually slide against the aprons on the table. And then finally, we assemble the top, we get that screwed on, and then what you're going to see is we come in, use my Fuji spray gun again, and we are spraying 4 coats of satin conversion varnish. I typically spray conversion varnish on pretty much all of my furniture. It's just got a really nice feel, and it's super durable, and it's just a really good top coat. I get this from Target Coatings. It is not a paid sponsorship. I just really like their products. Heard about them from a fellow woodworker, and I've been using them ever since and been really pleased. Lastly, I just wanted to leave you with some glam shots of the finished table. Hey, if you guys have made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I know this was a long one. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you guys do enjoy this video, be sure to like and subscribe to see more furniture. You can also check out my website if you're interested in purchasing anything from me. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.